I don't remember. I just mostly.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody. Let's get started. It's 7 o'clock, and I want to thank everybody for braving this great April weather. And welcome to the League of Women Voters Minneapolis Public Education Forum Civic Buzz. My name is Jane Lansing. I chair the Reimagining Public Safety Committee for the League. And the League is a nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation in all levels of government, works to increase understanding of major policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We recognize that diversity makes our organization and our democracy stronger. Inclusion of people with differing perspectives, opinions, and life experiences helps us to understand issues more fully and advocate more effectively. At our founding, we fought for women's equality, and we continue to fight for equity for all people in our political system. Our goal for Civic Buzz is that everyone leaves the discussion with a broader understanding of our topic, which tonight is public safety beyond armed police response. Over the last few years, we've also had discussions with the head of the police union, Chief of Police Brian O'Hara, and others involved in public safety, and you can watch recording of those events on our website, LWV Mpls.org. So now on to our program. Minneapolis receives over 10,000 calls to 911 a week. Not every call needs a response from an armed officer. Best practices from around the country have shown that developing alternatives to armed response by either mental health and addiction professionals or by experts with deep roots in the community who can calm and prevent violence deliver greater public safety. Today, we are joined by experts in these areas, and we felt the community does not see or hear enough about this aspect of public safety. So I'm going to go through and just read a short bio of each of our participants, and then we're going to dig right into the questions. So first of all, we have Todd Barnette. He is the Commissioner of Community Safety for Minneapolis. He was confirmed to this post in October 2023. In this role, he leads and coordinates 5 departments: 911, fire, emergency management, police, and neighborhood safety. Prior to this role, Commissioner Barnette served as an attorney in the Hennepin County Public Defender's Office for 14 years, 4 of which he supervised the drug court unit. Then he joined the Hennepin County Attorney's Office as Senior Assistant County Attorney in the Juvenile Division, and was also responsible for the Criminal Sexual Conduct Team within the Juvenile Division. In 2006, Commissioner Barnette was appointed to the Hennepin County Judicial District Court, where he served as the presiding judge of drug court and the presiding judge of the Criminal Division. Judge Barnette was elected Assistant Chief Judge by his colleagues in 2016 and Chief Judge in 2020. He is the first Minnesota State Court Chief Judge of color. Commissioner Barnette attended George Washington University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and sociology, and the University of Minnesota Law School. Next, we have Jordan Board Nelson. He is the Executive Director of Mad Dads Minneapolis, which is one of the city's 5 violence interrupter partners. He is also the pastor of Foundations Church, a community leader, husband, and father to 6 kids. Born and raised in South Minneapolis, Jordan's early life was marked by challenges that led to a 10-year prison sentence. It was during this time that he encountered the gospel of Jesus Christ, committed his life to faith, and pursued education, earning an associate degree in business management. After his release, Jordan served as a minister at Shiloh Temple International Ministries before launching the Foundation Church in 2020. The church's first act of service was providing essential supplies to the community following the unrest after George Floyd's murder. Since then, the church has been a beacon of hope, serving youth, former inmates, those battling addiction, and individuals affected by gang violence. Jordan is also a founder of the Youth Empowerment Club, a mentorship program for young people focusing on life and career skills. His leadership at Mad Dads Minneapolis continues his mission to create a safer, healthier communities, especially after losing his older brother to gun violence. Candace Hanson is co-founder and executive director of Canopy Mental Health and Consulting, the city's behavioral crisis response organization. She is also a licensed professional clinical counselor in Minnesota and board-approved supervisor. Prior to Canopy, Candace has worked in a variety of capacities in the mental health field, including program management, clinical supervision, crisis services, intensive residential treatment services, inpatient hospitalization, outpatient therapy, case management, and substance use disorder treatment. Candace's career, focus, and passion is on providing culturally responsive care and thinking innovatively about how clients and clinicians of color are supported and engaged in treatment settings and in the workplace. She is also passionate about working to decriminalize and destigmatize mental illness and promoting mental wellness, particularly in the Black community. Prior to becoming executive director of Canopy, Candace was the original program manager for the Minneapolis Behavioral Crisis Response, the city's unarmed first responder team responding to 911 calls using trauma-informed and culturally responsive best practices. So let us welcome our panelists. So before we kick off the questions and the panel discussions, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Basically, the program is going to start with some grounding conversations with each of our panelists, and then we're going to have a good 40 minutes for you to ask questions. We have people running around with cards, and raise your hand if you want a card, and if you have a question, flash your card, and they will pick it up, and we'll send it up to our question table here. Please write very neatly, pretend like you're a computer, print it out so that they're very legible. We are recording this event, and it will be posted on our website tomorrow. So let's start with Commissioner Barnette.
All right.
So would you please explain what the public health approach to public safety is?
Sure. Before I do that, I said it earlier to this group and share it with you. This is the first time I made a suggestion, and it actually happened. I said, hey, can you get Jordan and Candace on the panel? And that happened. Usually this doesn't happen for me, so I'm just happy. I'm happy that both of them could make it. I don't get this at work and I don't get this at home, so this is great for me. But public health approach in the city, and Candace worked for the city as well, but this approach is not new. Many urban cities do this to have an approach because public health and safety are interconnected when you want to get to the root cause of some things. So when you think of poverty, you think of maybe lack of education, you think of homelessness and other health challenges that might lead to crime. They both interconnect. And so I think that's important. I did jot down some notes because I had the good fortune that I was going to be asked this question. So I wrote down some key components that I think are important as we look at some of these factors and what the city's doing. One thing is that just like in health, we want to be data driven. You can find patterns and trends. And so that's one thing. We want to use that data to inform us on where should we as a city be spending our money to get the best results and outcomes for those. One thing that I think is important as well is that, again, we center community and get community's input into things that we think we need to get done, because a lot of times from the government, we tell the community what they want, but instead let's ask community what it is that they need and how can we work together. The other thing, other 2 or 3 things I would say is prevention programs are super important for what we do. I think both Jordan and Candace can talk about that. Collaboration across not only city departments, but county and state departments, bringing departments together for one goal of public health and safety. And we can't deny the focus that we need to have on mental health. Mental health is such a key to what we do. And then lastly, what I would say with this holistic approach here is that we have to consistently evaluate where we are and be adaptive to what our responses can be. So,
And just briefly, your organization that you have to kind of accomplish all that?
Oh my goodness. I'll go back to prior to being appointed by the mayor. when we were talking about this job, I said, so there's 5 departments under me, police, fire, 911, emergency management, and neighborhood safety. And so one of the things I said was that community safety doesn't lie in these just 5 departments. They're beyond these 5 departments. And so I need to be in a position to not ask for permission to talk with other departments. And this was very true. I think folks who have heard me talk before know this story. Within the first, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, I'm at an encampment asking that the encampment let the organizer know that we're going to close this large encampment. And they said, we need a dumpster and we need trash bags. None of my departments have control of that. And so I had to reach out to other departments to get that done. So it's really a big effort to address this in a holistic way. Yep.
So do you think that the mayor and the city council and the community understand this holistic approach, and do you feel supported by all of those stakeholders?
That's a loaded question. Here's what I say. I think all of us want, well, let me stop back and say this. Public safety, this is a re-election year for both the council and the mayor. Public safety is going to be probably the #1 issue throughout this election cycle. I think all elected officials want citizens to feel safe and want to provide safety for all folks. I know the mayor and I are aligned on how to do that. I think that there are council members that want to see a different implementation of how we do this. So I think we have the same goal, but I think that there's a difference in how it should be implemented. I think that one of the biggest things for us is that, I shouldn't say us, I would say for me, my job, I think, is setting expectations, because this will take time when you're trying to get to the root cause of some of the issues that we face in society. Yep.
So would you summarize for the audience, you know, I think people are very familiar with the police, but when it comes to neighborhood safety and behavioral crisis, kind of what the organizations and strategies are. We see these guys in t-shirts and different organizations, kind of what are those organizations and how does that work?
Gosh. Trying not to lump them all together because they are different. And so I would say to you all that it's easy to place police in a category. And then when we look at all the things that we are either trying to take off of the police plate, or look at how we're trying to approach safety in this holistic way, there are several ways to do that. I think Candace could talk about the behavioral crisis and their approach for mental health. We know that we can make situations worse when we send an armed officer to a situation. I've had an opportunity to do a ride along with our folks from BCR, and one of the best things that I saw with them is that they have the ability to stay with the person for a long time. And that matters, as opposed to an officer who has to go from call to call to call, they don't have the time to sit down and really talk with folks. And that really stood out with me, with their response and that ability to stay and talk with people and get them the help, talk with the family members that help support them is so important. When you look specifically at other areas of crime prevention, I think Jordan could talk about their approach. There's different approaches to whether you want to call it violence interruption, whether you want to call it an unarmed response to violence. There's different models out there. And some of the training that we've had from some national organizations will tell you that the city needs to use all of those avenues to get to where we want to be. We hired NYU Law School University to do a gap in access analysis of our services. And you would also see it in the Safe and Thriving Community Report that came out in 2022. We have a lot of the services that we need: prevention, responsive, and restorative. We're not coordinated and collaborated as how we bring those services to our residents and visitors. And so I guess that's sort of it in a nutshell.
So there's been a lot of reporting about the funding, transparency, and accountability, particularly of the violence interruption and violence intervention programs. Would you explain the problem and then kind of where this sits right now? Just sort of summarize the problem that's been written about in the newspaper.
So the city, let's say 2020, I think did, like a lot of cities, responded to unrest in a way that was needed. And that was, we really do need community organizations to work with us so that we are informed about what neighbors need, because what's needed in one area is not needed in the other. So I would say that was the approach, to address a concern right away. And I think they did a good job. When I got here, October 2023, one of the things that the mayor and I talked about, and you've heard me talk a little bit about it, and that is, let's be data driven. Let's make sure that we are evaluating programs to know that they work. If they don't work, why didn't they work? So if I'm talking to Mad Dads and there was a scope of service and that service didn't reach the outcome that we wanted to, why? Was that something that happened with the city? Was that something that we did? Did we not work together to really address the issue? And so that was some of the focus. When we get down to the nitty gritty of funding, what we needed to do was, one, improve our invoicing process. I would say, two, the procurement process needed to be tightened up. And then three, how did we go about what we call RFP, requests for proposals? And so a lot of times there was a request for proposals would be that the same people sat on the same review panels. And so we didn't really take bias out of that process. And so now what we do is we try not to use the same people on review panels. We try to change the review panels up. If there's any appearance of conflict, we try to make sure we remove that. So we just try to make sure that the process, one, is fair for everyone. Two, is transparent, that when you apply or you submit an application here for RFP, that you know what the scope is, that you understand what our invoicing and procurement process is and the documentation that we're going to require. And at the end of the day, if you did not get the award, because we're going to give the award to the highest scored vendor or service provider, that we also give you the opportunity to talk to our staff about what could you do to improve and where does things sit, because we think that's important.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Now, before we hear from Jordan,
Yep.
so, those are some steps made to kind of improve the program. And so where would you sort of state kind of where we are on our journey to having a public health approach? I mean, kind of what grade would you give us to date?
Oh, I have to give a grade?
Well, you don't have to give a grade.
I'm going to give myself an A, of course. No.
Not a grade. Just sort of a big picture assessment, and in terms of effectiveness, and maybe what are your big goals for the next couple of years? What are the next big steps to take and areas to focus on?
I'll try to explain it this way. Anyone who have ever started a business, I have not, but this is how I feel about where things are. I think that we have really big ideas. I think that when I got there, we had a startup company. When you especially look at neighborhood safety, so we need to build infrastructure into neighborhood safety so that it could be sustainable. We cannot arrest our way out of this issue. So as much as we put resources into police, if we don't have those same type of resources that we want as a society to have a response that's appropriate on the other side, we have to build this part up. So I would say that in the last year, we've really built a good foundation with having all of our departments in the city move in the same direction with community safety. I would say we were siloed in our approach, in that if you come any Tuesday, well, you can't attend, but if you looked in the window, you would see my 5 departments meet every Tuesday at 9 o'clock. And so as a group, we talk about what are the issues, what can we do together, but also as an enterprise now, we are in a good space where we're moving together. And so what do I see in the next year? I see in the next year that we are better coordinated, that we have better collaboration. And I think that the next budget cycle that's going to be tight is going to force that issue upon us.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So now let's hear from Jordan. And let's hear more about Mad Dads. Would you tell us just a little bit about the organization, how long it's been around, how many people? Just educate us a little bit.
Yeah. So Mad Dads has been around nationally since 1980.
I think they got to turn your mic on.
Uh-oh. You want to do it or me?
I got John.
All right. I'm dead. This is I think the box is dead.
He gave us this as a.
All right. Thank you.
There you go.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right. So we've been around nationally since 1989. Locally, we've been around since 1998. Currently, our national headquarters resides in Pittsburgh, and that changes based upon the national board. So whoever gets voted as the national president, then the national headquarters transitions to that city. Currently, we have 39 people on staff. We have
in Minneapolis or in the national?
in Minneapolis. I'm sorry, yes, in Minneapolis. Yep. So the Minneapolis chapter is the largest staff chapter. So Mad Dad started as a volunteer organization in Omaha, Nebraska, in 1989. Bishop Eddie Stanton's son was shot, and he wanted to go enact revenge against the people that shot his son due to the gang violence happening at the time. And his 2 friends, 2 other pastors came to him and said, hey, you know, that's not how we do. Like, we have to forgive. I know you're angry, but let's channel our anger in another way. So then they came and they said, man, we're Mad Dads. And then they said, well, what are Mad Dads? And then that's kind of where the acronym was developed: Men Against Destruction, Defending Against Drugs and Social Disorder. And they started canvassing. So this is a fun fact a lot of people won't tell you, but it's true. Mad Dads, as far as the data that we have on record, and when we've even talked to the White House, is the longest standing African American founded and led what we would call CVI organization, so Community Violence and Intervention. We used to train with the Department of Justice out of Washington, D.C. We used to hold contracts with them to train different cities and organizations on how to galvanize volunteers and to go canvass within the community. And a training center was actually built in Omaha, Nebraska, where people would come from around the country to learn how to canvass, how to get volunteers, and how to go into the community to create peace. In the drugs and the violence that was plaguing our community. And I believe that was built in 1993 or 1994. It was around the time when the first George Bush was president. So fun fact, and even a lot of the organizations that you hear out of other cities like Chicago and places like that, they actually got a lot of their training in canvassing tactics and techniques from us.
Oh, I didn't even know it stood for something. That's interesting.
Yes. So can I elaborate for a few seconds?
Sure.
So what you guys call violence interrupters, that's the title the city gave to the people who have a contract under the Cure Violence Global model. But there's an overarching name that actually is called CVI, Community Violence Intervention. That's where Mad Dads would fall under since 1989, which a good example would be BCR. They fall under CVI work because they look at alternatives to policing to solve some of the issues that plague our communities. Like when you have a mental health case, you don't necessarily have to send a police officer, you can send a BCR staff. I've actually rode for a whole day with some of their staff, just like the commissioner. And it's very interesting to see the dialogue and the relationships they build, even with some of the mental health patients that they visited them 3, 4, and 5 times. So that CVI work, it's not just violence interrupters. CVI work is youth work, it's jobs, it's violence prevention and intervention, so mediations, it's mental health. It's like a canopy, I guess we could say, of things that are all encompassed under CVI.
So how does somebody join Mad Dads, and how do you vet people? How do you train them?
So to join Mad Dads, we do background checks, but also we vet people by they have to first do, so Mad Dads, like I said, it started originally as a volunteer organization. So it used to be you have to volunteer for a whole year. But now we feel like we've been blessed enough to where we have certain contracts to where you still have to volunteer for 4 to 8 days. So when you come, you get interviewed, fill out an application, get interviewed, then you have to volunteer for 4 to 8 days. And then our team leads and our supervisor and our operations director, they determine then if you'll be a good fit for the team, but it also gives you an opportunity to determine if this is the type of work that you want to do. Like the team is here tonight, some of them, and they probably walk 5 miles a day on average. So it's more than just, are you willing to break up a fight? Like, can you walk for 5 miles? Like, what's your temperament if things get out of control? You know, like, how do you handle certain situations? And it gives us the opportunity to be able to assess the person, and then for the person to be able to assess the work that we're doing. And I always tell my team, if you're only here for the money or you're not here for the right reasons, you won't last, because you'll get weeded out because of the culture that we want to build.
And what's your strategy for deploying your people on the street? So do you respond to the city? Are there certain strategies, or do you have your own strategy for how and where you deploy your folks?
So that depends on who we're partnering with, but a typical strategy would be we would apply to work in a general area, and then within that general area that we put our application in for, we would then determine what times we should be deployed, where we should go. We have radios, so the teams would be able to communicate and know, like, is this a hot spot here? Is this a hot spot there? And then I do receive data from the city or from the county about where some of the like shooting hotspots are. And then with the team being out there every day, they kind of can just assess, like, hey, this encampment is a little bit wild, like, let's go here for a couple hours. So really it's based on an as-needed approach, but it does come with a plan of a general mapped out area with us understanding where the hotspots typically are and where they typically remain.
And so there are several violence interrupter groups in the cities, and there are several that have contracts with the city. How do you work with them? I mean, do you have different areas of service specialties, or do you have different geographies? What's your sort of interaction with the other groups?
Yes, so there are different geographies. So it's kind of like, I love what Commissioner Barnette said, you can't arrest your way out of this. So it's kind of like a police precinct. You have first precinct, second precinct, third precinct, but they each have their own kind of district that they patrol. So it's very similar to that, because we understand, yes, you can arrest your way out of this, but you also can't cover the whole city just as being Mad Dads. So you have to have people in the geographies that are the right geographies to be in. And then we have bi-weekly meetings. So every 2 weeks we meet with other violence interrupter organizations and just other organizations that focus on community safety, where we brainstorm, have conversation, shoot ideas back and forth. And like if we hear something terrible happen in somebody's neighborhood, they may reach out to me and say, hey, what's going on? Are y'all okay? Should we come support you guys? And we'll do the same thing and vice versa.
Would you describe an interaction for us just to kind of make it real so we can understand kind of what you actually do out there?
Yeah, there's a lot. I will give you this interaction. So I remember one of our team members were on a patrol, and there were two young men who were arguing back and forth. And long story short, one of the young men had a firearm. And our team member stepped in and said, hey, you don't want to do that. You know, and with us having the relationship of being on that particular corner, conversation with the young man, the other young man was still standing there. He put his firearm away. They were willing to shake hands and drop it and go their separate ways, which the crazy part about it was they were friends. We don't know what transpired for them to be that upset with each other, but we know that that day somebody's life was saved. And just last year alone, we had 596 incidences of violence and 7 actual, like, on-the-spot incidences where somebody either was brandishing a gun or a knife. And our team, they have no bulletproof vests, they have no guns, no batons. Actually, in the contracts we have to sign, we're not allowed to carry weapons. But they do what they have to do to try to make sure everybody's safe.
And do you work beyond the incident? Do you work like with families or kids, or are you just basically kind of doing that spot work when there's a hot spot?
So we do work beyond the incident, but a lot of it depends on the person or the family. So we have a resource office. In our resource office, if people want to receive continued help, they can either make an appointment, or they can show up and make an appointment, or they can help them on the spot to be able to receive further resources. If it's jobs, addiction and recovery, we do work with youth in a couple different school districts, which has led to us being able to then build some relationships with some parents. And we also have a workforce program that works with men and women incarcerated. And currently right now we have 64 people who will be released this year from prison who have signed up to join our workforce program.
Great. Going back to what we talked to the commissioner about the funding issue, are you 100% funded by the city? And have you gotten help from the city in preparing or improving your financial and effectiveness documentation? Because I know that the city had talked about that. We had seen that there was going to be a program to help the contractors do a better job with invoicing and such. And have you gotten any of that?
I'm going to do like the commissioner. I did receive the questions ahead of time as well. And I was working on them. And actually, the answer to that is no and no. So, meaning, no, we're not 100% funded by the city. And no, the city has not had to help us with our documentation. And what I mean by that is not in a negative connotation or remark to the city, but I started at Mad Dads in November 2022. And one of my first intentions was to build an organization that operates with the integrity and the dedication for the community that they're serving. So I know there's a lot of things in the news about violence interrupters organizations and paperwork, general ledgers, data points, all of those things. Well, I do want to clear something up. We didn't start this work with the violence interrupters until 2023. Those news reports go back to 2020, 2021, 2022. And I'm not here to knock any organization because I don't know what happened. I was not present. But what I am here to say is since I've been at Mad Dads, our documentation, our data keeping, all of those things we've always provided, we've always had, and we've actually worked with members in the city in some of the planning meetings, and even Hennepin County, where we've adopted a system called Connect Team, where Hennepin County is in conversation with us for us to train them in using Connect Team, because we use that for our staff to provide the right documentation, hours, making sure staff are at work, all of those things that were in the news reports. So we try to the best of our ability to make sure that everything is documented and that we are doing everything we say that we're doing.
That's
But-
probably why he wanted you on the
No, but Jordan, but Jordan, you have a financial person
Yes, we have
in-house.
We have a finance manager, and we also have an operations director who he's not here tonight. He'll hate me for saying this, but I like messing with him. He actually used to be the regional operations director for Chick-fil-A and Dave & Buster's. So he came here to work at META, and then he said, you know what, I really want to give back to my community. And so we had an interview process. Somebody met him, told him about what we do, and he said, man, I'm not worried about the pay cut. I want to give back to my community. And so he came to really help us build our operations out.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the same question. As you look forward and you look at the whole sort of industry of violence prevention, and how do you see it evolving? What do you think are the important next steps, things that you'd like to see different, either in your relationship with the city, processes? What's next?
I'm listening to you. The disclaimer, so Commissioner Barnette's a little older, so he has paper notes. I put mine on my phone, so I don't have But I am listening, I'm present, I swear I am.
I'm old school too.
That's actually a great question, and I actually came with a loaded answer. This work is extremely important. And this work has to be invested in. And if this work isn't invested in, I don't think we'll ever fully understand what it means to be safe in community. And I just was watching a news report on the way here, actually. I was at the barbershop. And CBS News Tonight just did a report on Baltimore and Brooklyn. And Brooklyn has not had any homicides in, I think they said 482 days. From doing the very similar work that we do with community violence intervention. The city of Baltimore, homicides are down 30%. So Chicago, many big cities that we hear about as being very violent, they're down, homicides are down 30%, 40%, 50%. The city of Philadelphia just fully funded their violence prevention initiatives. And I know a lot of people get afraid because they think violence prevention means no police. Well, they're wrong. The reality is the police are gonna always be here. That's just a part, that's a staple of American society. That is who people are gonna go to for safety. But the truth of the matter is a lot of black and brown people aren't always safe with the police. So now there has to be other conversations about how communities feel safe and what safety means to them. And we're starting to learn that investing in people who live in the community or who come from the community to transform some of the violence that was happening in the community is actually a better deterrent than just to lock them up and throw away the key. And we have to be able to convince the elephant and the donkey, if you know what I'm talking about, that this work is important on all sides.
Yep.
So the first day, January 20th this year, the first day the new president took over the White House, the Office of Violence Prevention was eliminated from the White House. You could go to the website that day, it was gone. So we see that there's not necessarily a huge push for community members and organizations to be able to provide safety and resources to their community. But the data says that when this happens, crime is down, economics go up, and if we all know, when economics go up, when money goes up, you have less crime. One of the key factors to crime is poverty. So the data shows when we invest in the people who work in the community on a regular basis, and we invest in them with jobs, with resources, workforce development, violence intervention, whatever it is, that crime does actually go down. You just saw the report that North Minneapolis had a 10% drop in violent crime. Well, the state of Minnesota in 2023 passed $75 million for community violence intervention to be within these communities that were plagued by violence. And when people who live in the community were able to work in their community to create change, we see a decrease in these crimes. I'll be bold. Black and brown people are the only people who are told to protect your community, keep it safe, be there, coach somebody else's kids, but at the same time work 60 hours a week for less than what somebody in Edina, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka may make. Nobody is told to bear the burden of their community and bear the burden of taking care of their family like people of color. And that goes all the way back to slavery. I won't get into all of the history, but understanding the investment in this work and the proper investment so the people who know how to do the work can get it done, and then the education of those people as well, so they can do things the right way as well and not make some of the mistakes that maybe people have claimed in the past. Everybody makes mistakes, but to condemn a whole international movement of work because a small body of mistakes is exactly how we continuously end up in the same, just the wheel that keeps spinning. And I'll close with this. Tomorrow, if you want to show up, be there. There's a bill by someone from in the House, the Minnesota House of Republicans, presenting a bill to do away with the funding that's left for community violence intervention work. So 3 p.m. is the deadline. I'll be speaking there, but they want to take the money that's left for community organizations to do violence intervention and other things in their community. Like my team over here, if they take that funding, they don't have a job. And I know they're probably like, "What? You didn't tell us that." That's how they're working. So like there's a lot of important things happening that we have to pay attention to. And if you want to be there, show up if you want to support, and you really do support this work, because that money they want to just move to the general fund. There's no plan for it, but just take it from the people who've been using it for good, put it in the general fund until we figure out what to do. And that's how we keep ending up feeling like we keep getting put at the bottom of the barrel again and have to claw our way back up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Candace.
Yeah? Can y'all hear me? Yeah?
Yeah, so would you describe your organization, Canopy, and how long you've worked with the city, and where are you towards the city's goal of 24/7 vans in all precincts?
Yeah, so I'm going to do just a really quick correction there. Canopy Mental Health and Consulting is actually the name of our mental health services clinic. It's actually Canopy Roots is the name of the part of our company that provides the service to the city. They're separate because they do slightly separate things. One is treatment services, one is clinically informed services. So that correction, Canopy Roots, is definitely what we would be calling it. Today, for the purposes of what we're talking about today, those two companies do share upper management, so I am executive director of both of them. So the second part of your question.
So basically kind of, yeah, the organization, and then where are you towards, and probably the organization that serves the city with behavioral crisis response, and like, you know, vans and kind of what you do and what you deploy and what services you provide.
Yeah, so we provide the BCR service for the city of Minneapolis, and the BCR service is kind of our name for the partnership between Canopy Roots and the city. We provide a behavioral health or mental health first response. That means that we are completely integrated into the 911 system. That means that we have the same computers, same radios, same linkage to 911 that police and fire and all of the other first responder organizations have. There are a lot of different cities that do this type of work, but having it this integrated is kind of the gold standard based on the people who study this work. To have that integration makes it easier to communicate and also makes it safer for the responders. One of the things that we focus on when we go out to a call is assessment, right? We're trying to assess what is needed from us, but also we're assessing the individual who is the subject of the call. Our background is mental health, so all of our staff are either mental health practitioners or mental health professionals in the state of Minnesota. So state statute designates those two definitions. One of them is a licensed person who could hold one of I think 5 different licenses, and then practitioner is a combination of education and experience in the area of mental health, but they may not necessarily be a licensed person. So everyone on our team is one of those, qualifies as one of those mental health practitioner or professionals. So that's the credentials of the folks on our team. The people who lead our team, though, and who provide the supervision to all of our staff are licensed mental health professionals, again, which could be one of 5 licenses in Minnesota. We're assessing the need. We're assessing what that person's situation is with their mental health. We're assessing the safety primarily, right? The safety of that person as well as the people around them. We are also wondering about what can we do to connect them to what they need to prevent a call like this in the future. So I'll give you an example because I know one of the questions on there is about this. A typical call. I was actually doing a ride-along last week because we shadow our new responders a certain amount of time before they're able to be on the field in their own. And we go out in teams of 2, but when I shadow people or when any of the clinicians who works there shadows people, we'll go out as that third person and just kind of be a third set of eyes there. We worked with a person who had called probably about 4 times that week. They had called fire once. They had utilized police twice. They didn't want to deal with them anymore, and they were finally, okay, I'll take the BCR. I think they didn't want to deal with the BCR at first. So finally, we met with them maybe twice, and then this was our 3rd call to them. And this team went out, and they had already spoken to our other staff who had gone out the first times. And we had a strategy. We're trying to work on motivational interviewing with this person. We're trying to figure out how we can move them from kind of this pre-contemplation to contemplating the possibility that they might maybe need to see a doctor. So this time we did kind of make more ground with this person, and then we ended up being able to get some of her caseworkers on the phone, and then we actually were able to connect with one of them and then figure out how they could get her in to see her psychiatrist. We did safety assessment. We realized that there was a little bit of risk of suicide. We complete an assessment when we realize that there is a risk, and we have to do all that documentation. And then we also wanted to assess, is she a danger to herself? Do we need a higher level of care right now, or can we have her stay in the community with the support? Well, our hope is always to let that person stay in the community with the support that they need. And when we got in touch with that caseworker, we were able to connect them, and we were able to get her to start thinking about the possibility that she might be in a hypomanic episode, which probably was, right? We're not giving diagnoses, right? But we do have to recognize some symptoms to be able to understand, what is the risk here, right? And we have to be able to assess and ask questions to assess risk, and we have to be able to get around things like lack of insight, which typically comes with psychosis, and we also have to know how to get around some of the defensiveness or anger or frustration that can come up when you're not getting what you want or you need from the system. And so I watched our responders do a brilliant job of motivational interviewing, doing a brilliant job of connecting this person with their worker that already existed and moving her towards the process of seeing her psychiatrist. Now, we haven't gotten another call from that person. I don't know, maybe we will, but the calls stopped for that week. This would be a really good example of how if officers were there, they might have done, okay, there are some officers that they could be one of the people on our team. Some of them are, we've met a few who are really skilled, but all in all, they would not be able to spend the type of time we spent with her. And they may not have the expertise to understand that there is a risk, the increased risk that this person had because of being in a hypomanic episode, and they might not know the questions to ask when we're trying to figure out, you know, how do we make sure this person is safe until they can connect with their people. And also, they can go and do the things that they need to do, and we can stick to the things that we're good at. So our staff really did a really great job, and that was really an ideal scenario for a mental health call.
So what kind of coverage do you have in Minneapolis now?
Yeah.
I mean, is it 24/7, and how?
Yep.
Is it across the entire Twin City, entirety of Minneapolis?
Yes. So for a few years now, we've been 24/7. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's been at least 2 years now. But what we've been doing is, back when we started the program, we had to work up to 24/7, and then once we were at 24/7, we had to say, you know, what kind of resources do we really need widely around the city? And I think at the time, dispatch was really kind of naming what it was that they needed or they wanted. And we were kind of just along for the ride, which is totally fine. And they were wanting 5 vans citywide, 1 in each precinct. Well, turns out that isn't necessary all the time, right? There's some shifts where that is just, it's not needed, and there's other shifts where more than that is needed. And so there is always someone on 24/7, but depending on the time of day and the day of the week, it might range from 1 van to 6.
Oh, okay, interesting. Now, your folks are deployed by 911 who've been trained in behavioral health crisis analysis. So how has this worked, and has your staff ever felt unsafe? Have they ever gone to a call that's maybe been improperly assessed?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked this. First of all, I'll lead with the fact that, generally speaking, dispatch has done an amazing job. Like, I was pretty shocked at how smoothly it's gone, frankly. I think there's always going to be a learning curve, especially if you have new people in dispatch. And they have to kind of get up to speed. And this is if you worked in another city and then you come to Minneapolis and dispatch and you have this extra tool of BCR, you have to even if you've done it before, you have to relearn how to use BCR as a tool as one of the first responders. And so there's a learning curve for new dispatch folks, but overall they do really, really well. Whenever things do happen where maybe we're not appropriate for the call, we have a really nice process of just noting that, and then we do regular meetings, at least weekly, sometimes more than that, to connect with dispatch to let them know, hey, this happened on this day, let's, you know, circle back and make sure that this, you know, is addressed. And sometimes always actually, if it's a more serious thing and there was a safety issue, we get them on the phone right away and they handle it. They've been really amazing. Our people, so I want to talk about safety for a second, because this is, I think, a common misconception that this work is dangerous. When I heard about your team going out and being like, there's a firearm right there, ooh, bless y'all, thank you. My people don't typically feel unsafe. It's just really rare. Instances of us being harmed or physically assaulted I think maybe we have one or 2 instances the whole time. But we train our staff really well on, you know, first of all, it's about how you engage someone, and it's also about physical spacing, right? And in both of those instances, the staff who did get hit, I think one person was punched or hit with something, they were fine. They were fine, and they did say, no, they did say, I was too close. And so if we follow our procedure, and when procedures follow, it's very safe. And even you know, in other cities where this work is being done, that's the same record across the board. In Denver, in Eugene, all of these cities, responders who do this work and go out unarmed, no vests, They have been largely safe. None of them have been seriously injured or killed. And if there are injuries, they're minor injuries, as was in the case on our team in those couple of instances.
Candace, could you just say how many calls you take in a year?
Okay, yes, out of, oh my gosh, how many is it now?
25,000,
I thought it was in the 30s now.
like around just under
Okay, yeah, just under,
total since launch.
total since launch. So just under 30,000
Wow.
Since,
since 2021, December of 2021. And so that's a lot of calls, and they've, for the most part, been very safe and gone very smoothly. There have been a few times where our staff, where safety issues came up, like maybe a firearm was discovered or there was a weapon discovered. Officers are out there lightning quick, and everybody works together really well.
Are you ever deployed with the police, or are you typically deployed just you or the police, or are you sometimes deployed together?
Yeah, so these numbers might have changed, but I think they said, is it 30% of them are with officers? There we go, my staff is saying, yes, that's the right number. Thank you, TCD. 30% are with officers, and the other remaining calls are just us independently, our team independently. And so there's a fair amount of instances where we are working together, and it's really actually, I think, a success story of this program, because when we started, frankly, we didn't actually even plan for the scenario that officers would want to go out with us. And then within a couple of weeks, they were requesting us. And so once they saw how we worked and what we do, and we started really working together and communicating with each other, it really started to go pretty well, pretty quickly. One of the things that is really important to Canopy is like keeping our culture separate, right? Like police officers have one culture, and mental health first response is a completely different one. And we are very intentional about keeping those separate, because what our response requires is for us to operate the way that we do. From a person-centered lens, the community member is an expert on their situation and their needs. We are not wielding authority. We can't make you do anything. All of this is very voluntary, but we are definitely going to work with you to try to figure out how we can help you, right? When we need to keep that attitude as we go out on the streets. And so we try to keep our culture separate, but we still work together really well. And it really is beautiful to see it play out.
So the city recently moved funding for your operation from neighborhood safety to fire department. Benefits, downsides, have you noticed a difference? What happened there?
I think it's a little too early to tell like how things are going, but I always tell people I'm always team fire. My dad was a fire captain in Atlanta when he retired, and so I love fire, but that's just me. We really so far it's gone really well. They're still really learning about what we do and learning about our response, and so far they've just been super enthusiastic to have us as a part of that part of the city government, and it's been great. It's been chill.
Okay. The same financial question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have help from the city in preparing or improving your financial effectiveness documents, or not needed, or what?
Yeah, because we're a business, we have to keep all those records anyway. We couldn't make it through a tax year without it. But not necessarily, no. But it's just been as the stuff unfolded with like. What would be required for like invoicing and documentation, we've just been like, okay, well, how can we meet those expectations about how can we hand over what we keep? But we've always kept the documentation because we have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then again, the same question. As you look forward, what do you think are the most important areas of mental health first response that need to evolve? What's the future look like?
That's a good question. The field is really new of behavioral health first response. There's always been behavioral crisis. That's been around for since the 80s, right? People who work in mental health, who are going out into the community and supporting people in crisis. That's been around for a long time, but the part of the field that involves actually being an integrated first responder, that is very, very new, and it is and using them to specifically divert from 911 is very new. There's some really great universities who are and think tanks who are studying it and focusing on it, and so we're kind of having to stay very closely plugged into the national community of other cities who are doing this work and rolling out this work, as well as the people who are studying it. So it really is like just this constant process of learning what has worked in other cities. And we have staff dedicated specifically to that because it's so important to keep a pulse on research and the new things that are being rolled out. They've got great programs in Georgetown and NYU, the Vera Institute. There's just a lot of great research that's happening. So we really have to stay connected to it very closely. So I think that would be necessary to keep establishing the field of mental health, and some people call it mental health and behavioral health. They use them interchangeably. Behavioral health first response, developing it as a profession, as a specific part of this field, and hopefully maybe even developing like certification and licensure, because it really is a unique set of training that you need. Some people will say, oh, a licensed mental health person needs to do this work. I'm a big advocate for the fact that we do not need to limit it to licensed people. We need people with lived experience who can do this work. And I will say, in our experience of running this team, the people who do the best job are not the very experienced licensed people. It's just the reality. So further establishing the identity of this profession, but also too, I think, just getting some of that data that a lot of the cities have been gathering and looking at it for what it means for how we change the response and being able to adjust the response. Like, the one thing that Canopy prides itself in is really been able to pivot quickly. Like, okay, we saw this is happening. We saw that the information has told us this. Let's pivot. It doesn't have to take a year. We can do it in 6 weeks, right? Or less than that. So, yeah.
Well, I want to thank these guys for their phenomenal grounding in the subject. And I think I'm shorting you a few minutes on your questions, but we're going to get to as many as we can. And hopefully I can read them. Jordan, you're 39 people on staff. What is the average tenure with Mad Dads? And are all your contacts with municipalities and school district? And what's a normal shift? How many hours? And solutions. Oh, and do you have a solution to all the guns? Oh, there's a good question.
Can I read that as I go through it?
Yeah.
Oh, now you want to use paper.
What did I say?
Now you got to use paper.
So the 39 people on staff, what's the tenure with Mad Dads? It depends. So like our workforce development program, what we do is we hire people to come and work for us part-time, and then we help them transition out the door. So the goal is for them to find a career, which I just saw we have a Connect team, all company chat. One of our team members actually, I started working with the City of Minneapolis Public Works Department. So it depends on what part of our program they're in. So if they're in like our Community Crime Intervention and Prevention program, well, that's a 2-year contract. So most of those staff members, they last, I would say, about 9 months to a year working part-time hours. If they're in our workforce development program, it's about a 3 to 6 month time period before they transition out. And then if they're like in our back office, or if they're like a program director or a manager or like a supervisor or a leader, their tenure is actually, I've been there 2.5 years, and all of our supervisors and directors and managers that have came on since I've started are still currently there. The next question, are your contracts with municipalities? So I'll start with the school districts piece. We actually don't have a contract with the school district. Myself, when we started the Youth Empowerment Club in 2020, we actually just started helping out in schools, and we just kind of kept that same work up with Mad Dads and the Youth Empowerment Club together. So it's not a contract. There are just certain schools out there that look for extra community support to come in, volunteer free of charge, and to just help out during the day with the students or to help out after school. And that's a lot of where the school stuff happens. Municipalities, so no, we have contracts with state of Minnesota, Hennepin County, so not just dependent upon the city of Minneapolis, but yes, a bulk of our contracts do come from the RFPs like Commissioner Barnette was referring to that get released. What's a normal shift? Once again, depends on the contract. The typical shift for our evening team is either 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. or 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. And then we have a daytime team that's 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then these vary in between Monday through Saturday. Sunday's pretty much our only off day. Solution to all the guns. Stop making bullets. A gun doesn't work if you don't have bullets. I think Chris Rock said that a long time ago.
Bullet control.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper to stop making bullets. But seriously, a solution to the guns, honestly, and I mean, I would just beat this over the head over and over again. The data clearly shows that when you have people with lived experience who have transformed their life, and I think a huge thing is people expect people with lived experience to be perfect. So, oh, this guy, I saw him at the liquor store. Or look at this team, I saw them standing around downtown smoking cigarettes. Newsflash, the police sit in their police cars and they sit on blocks and they post up because presence means a lot. So it's not a knock on them, it's to say understanding that we provide a presence and having the proof that people with lived experience can actually have some credibility to be able to have a conversation to the people who have access to the guns to convince them to put the guns down. If you're asking me about the NRA and from a political standpoint about gun laws, I typically stay away from that because I've had a brother murdered by gun violence. I have 21 other friends that have been killed through gun violence throughout my whole life, whether it be suicide or being in the street. And I've just taken on the stance that people are gonna be the ones to take people's lives, regardless if the guns exist or not. Because I've been to prison for 10 years and there's no guns. And I've seen 2 people get stabbed to death. So at the end of the day, it's about helping people change their thought process, and it's about helping people transform their life. Then it doesn't matter if the guns exist or not. And I can get into some faith stuff, but I won't. I'll respect the whole room.
So Candace, do you work with Hennepin County on the provision of mental health and social services at all?
No, we do not. The BCR does a really fair amount of connection with Hennepin County COPE. And so one of the things that comes up is that people don't always understand the difference between a BCR response and a COPE response. COPE is Hennepin County's mental health crisis team that goes out and does a full crisis assessment and to assess whether a person has a need for stabilization services, and stabilization services involve some really kind of some intensive assessment, as well as qualification for some specific services like case management, med management, and over the course of, I think, up to 14 days while staying in the community. Hennepin County COPE is an example of mental health crisis teams that have been around for a really long time, but are not integrated into 911 and are not necessarily considered to be first responders, right? And so our team, if they see that somebody has a need for community stabilization, they will connect them to COPE. We are think more of the BCR as more of a service that doesn't, we don't have to go through the full assessment process to qualify this person for funding before we can do anything for them. We can do that in the moment assessment for safety and that connection without billing insurance, the way that COPE has to do. And then also without billing the person, which sometimes COPE might have to do that. They don't typically do it, but they may have to. We don't have to do any of that. And that's one of the things I tend to try to advocate for this type of work across the country is that, yes, crisis services are often paid for by Medicaid or different insurances, but this would be a whole different discussion, I guess, but having a response that does not require a person to be billed or billing their insurance and thinking of this service as just like you don't get a bill when police or fire shows up for you, and thinking of this response in that way, and then thinking of us on that emergency call as a connector to those other levels of care and stages of stabilization beyond responding to that 911 call. Another note, we also work with them in the police precincts. There is an embedded social worker. That means a person who can do phone follow-up and the occasional community follow-up. I think I've heard that they're developing the ability to do like in-person follow-up more. That's great. I love that. And so we will often, if there's people on our calls who don't have services or need connection to, they need follow-up, then we will get the embedded social worker from Hennepin County to put them on the list for follow-up.
Can I just follow up a couple of things? One is really the significant part here is that you can call 911. I mean, they are part of the service. You can't discount that. The other thing in my ride along in the 911 center is that some people call 911 and specifically ask for them to respond, which I think is just fantastic. Don't underestimate the fact that the work that's being done with Mad Dads and other organizations, the work that's being done with Canopy Roots, when you think of these calls or the prevention work that's being done, remember that that's not a police officer having to do that when you have a force that's 40% down, that they've taken this work off of them, which is so important for us as well. And the last thing that I would add is that the embedded social workers are what in the precincts. We're paying for them through a contract, and they are from Hennepin County. Those social workers, why did we contract with them? Because they can get into the social services computers and make those connections, which is so important. We're also in the process of piloting I'm gonna call it a program that to embed a social worker into 911, because we have some folks who call quite often and tie up our call takers. And so if we can get that social worker talking with them, we're gonna see how well we do with that. And I think that'll help us. And not only that, Candace was talking about our call takers doing a great job. Remember, they can see that they have other calls coming in, so they can't spend the time with the person on the phone that they might want to. So they are trying to get as much information to know who to dispatch, but if we can have that social worker in there, we can hand that off to the social worker who can really talk to them and make sure that we spend the right amount of time with them. So I just think that's important, just to follow up with that.
So there's a few that I'm going to kind of put together here. One of them is talking about crime in Kenwood Isles. There were a number of vandalized cars, and the public safety initiatives for Uptown were funded but not implemented. When will Uptown get safety resources? I noticed that 3.4 million was approved, and I saw that the contract group for Cedar Riverside contract was canceled, and it's a high crime area against women, but the contract was given to the Sabathani Center when it does not have a safety group. Why move a group money to Sabathani? So it's, kind of where are these groups deployed and why with this money? And this is probably a little bit different. Maybe just to address those questions about the deployment of groups, the funding of this, and how they're deployed to which neighborhoods.
I'll try to remember all of that.
They did their homework.
I know. So this is I think that's a fabulous question. Here's where we are and then where we want to be. You heard Jordan talk about a lot of the work is done in geographical locations. We need to be in a place where we, just like BCR is being dispatched, we need to be dispatching our folks to different places based on the data. And so the idea that we're heading towards and implementing is that we have this comprehensive community safety ecosystem. We don't have it yet, we're building it. And so when you look at where we are, Jordan's Mad Dads are in certain neighborhoods. We push for peace in another neighborhood. We really need to, as a city, have a handle on how we deploy them based on the data. I think we're doing a better collaborative job at doing that because we're bringing these organizations together and giving them the data from MPD to say, here's what we're seeing and where can you help out. There are spots throughout the city that do not have this service. We're working on what we would call a master contract in order to have some organizations under an umbrella to deploy to places that do not have these preventive services. Now I'm going to attack the real political question here that's embedded here. Every time a council member earmarks money for a particular neighborhood in their ward, that means I have less flexibility to have a comprehensive plan. That's just flatly the way it is. I'm not saying anything about the fact that how you can earmark money or move money. That's within their authority to do, but there are impacts on how that happens. I think you saw some of that play out recently. Uptown. I was at Uptown Theater, I think, last week, and there were a lot of questions about safety in Uptown. Here's what I would say. I'll say it for Uptown. I'll say it for any neighborhood in Minneapolis. If there's a carjacking or robbery, you don't need violence interrupters. You don't need the safety ambassador. That's a police response when that happens. We are following the recommendations with the technical assistance from Cure Violence. In that, we identified zones in which the recommendations were we need to address these particular zones. And that's what we're doing. Councilmember Osmond lost the services in Cedar Riverside. And so he got the votes and earmarked $650,000 for Cedar Riverside to come in. That money was taken from the South Minneapolis Community Safety Center pilot programs that are coming. And so there will be an impact for doing that, and we'll have to assess that impact. Fully has the authority to do that, but it means less flexibility in other places. Uptown in particular, you have a new inspector, Inspector Novak. I think he'll do a great job for Uptown. The real issue when you look at crime around the city is that something that Jordan said, presence matters. We have 583 officers when I checked last week. Prior to 2020, we had 880. Out of the 583, you can take about 40 or 50 of them and say they're on vacation or some special leave because they're injured or something. And so the way that we're able to address crime around the city right now and do a good job at reducing crime is because we are filling those shifts with about 30 or 40% overtime. So if you think of a priority one call where something active is happening, robbery, carjacking, sexual assault, or something like that, that's going to deploy the police there immediately. And here's anecdotally what I've found out from the officers or what have you. They want to respond to those lower priority calls, 3s and 4s. So your garage gets broken into. When you get home, there's no one there. You call 911, say your garage was broken into, a bike was stolen. Our officers want to be able to respond to you right away. But here's what happens. I saw it in a ride-along. We're in the police car. We're responding to a priority one call. That priority one call is being cleared. That officer is saying, okay, I can go to priority 3. They're on their way. They get called to another priority one call, right? We just don't have enough officers. And then when they get to you, it's 4 hours later. It is frustrating for them because they know that you're going to be mad. They don't like it, but that's the reality of where we are until we get more officers. So what can I say that's more cheery than that? Is that when you look at our numbers, it's not by a lot, but for the first time since 2019, we have more officers in the force for 2024, more officers higher than we lost. And so hopefully we can keep that trend up. The other part I would add is that the thing that we've seen an increase is lateral hires. And why would I bring that up? We've had more lateral hires than ever before because that's not a recruitment tool because we sent something out on social media or you saw something in a paper or electronically. That is word of mouth. Someone came to the department because they wanted to leave another law enforcement office to come here, and that's important to us. And we're doing a great job there. I just think we're on that right path to keep hiring more officers, to have a presence, because we know presence in community matters. So hopefully that answered most of it.
Okay, we have one last question. Do you feel that the MPD rank and file understand the role of organizations like Mad Dads or PCR? So Jordan, with the MPD? It's on automatically. He'll work it for you. Just go.
I would say no. Reason why I say that is because we've had several incidences where I'll just give one example. A young man was shot at the encampment, and our staff were was giving him CPR. So last year, once a year, our staff go through CPR and first aid and stop the bleed training through the Red Cross. We just had 10 members take crisis intervention training last week through Barbara Snyder, and we try to put all of our staff through that, depending on cost though, because it's expensive for that one. And then our staff go through de-escalation training and other trainings like that. And they were given CPR, and long story short, MPD didn't really understand what they were doing and told them to leave. That young man ended up passing away. And I'm not here to point the finger at anybody, but that was like a light bulb went on to me that y'all really don't know what we do. A lot of people think that we're just there to stand on corners, but they don't understand that unless you've only been with us for the last couple months and you missed the CPR training, our staff are trained in CPR. They get the CIT, they get the de-escalation, they know how to stop the blood if you get shot in the leg and they pull up on the scene. They know how to put a tourniquet on you. Like, we have staff members who, they know how to use Narcan if someone is overdosing. So that really turned the light bulb on for me that a lot of officers really don't know who we are, even though we've been here a long time, especially because a lot of officers are new, considering how so many left after 2020. So I actually presented, and this is something that we're working on with MPD, I presented to them and they agreed with it, to have us go to a roll call and say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do. So when you see us, you have to respect us, respect what we're doing, and understand we're here to keep peace and safety as well.
Okay.
Our job may be different than yours, but we're here.
Yeah, let's give Candace a minute or two to answer it, and we'll wrap up.
Cool. Yeah, I would say that because there are there has been a big influx of new officers, they don't all understand. But one of the things that we have been doing is, and that actually we've been invited to do since the very beginning, is go to roll calls. And so we do that. We have a ongoing rotation through the roll calls done by our lead responders and our supervisors and our managers. So it generally goes pretty well for us to try to educate them if there's any change. Recently, we have had some issues with communication about our scope. We were getting some calls outside of our scope, and MPD was like, but we really need you to take them. And we're like, but we would love to, but this outside of our scope. So we're still trying to work through some of that stuff, but when there's changes and shifts, it does take a while to update them.
Okay, the last question is really a comment, and it says, could the league broadly communicate that this presentation is available? More communication like this would help our city, which I think is an incredible endorsement from this audience of our speakers here tonight. So, really, just a tremendous appreciation for what you do for our city and for the knowledge that you have brought to all of us about this aspect of public safety that we really don't spend enough time talking about and understanding. So thank you all. Thank you guys for coming out on what is not. Oh yes, well, I mentioned that. Yeah, so for all coming out on a night that is not the greatest. Thank you to First Unitarian for this beautiful space. For recording it, and the recording will be available tomorrow on our website. There's a table outside with all of the handouts, and there's handouts from Canopy and from the Legal and Voters, so take a look at everything that's available outside. And lastly, drive home safely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.